On the 21st of February 1944, a large Allied bombing operation known as Big Week was taking place. The objective of the operation was to destroy vital industrial complexes in the heart of Germany, in an effort to hinder the Third Reich's war machine. As with many other daytime bombing raids, the large formations of bombers were escorted by the trusty P-47D Thunderbolts. These planes were renowned for their ruggedness, powerful armament and amazing performance. One pilot of such an escort fighter was the 22-year-old Floyd Martin Stegall. Born on the 5th of April 1921 in Knox County, Illinois, he joined the US Army Air Force like so many other men his age during the war. Stegall was part of the 375th Fighter Squadron, which itself was a part of the 361st Fighter Group. On the morning of the 21st, Stegall departed in his P-47 from the squadron's base in Baddesley, England. Stegall's plane was fitted with an experimental propeller which was controlled hydraulically and had an electric emergency control. After crossing the Dutch-German border at 25,000 feet, or about 7.5 kilometers, the hydraulic control failed. Propeller blades went flat, which rendered the engine useless. Stegall switched to his electrical control, but after he caught up with his flight, this also failed. His plane slowly started to go down. Stegall had to make a choice. He could jump out of his plane and deploy his parachute, but because of his nerves he was unable to lift his legs. He opted to ditch the plane in het IJsselmeer, a large body of water in the Netherlands. The anxious pilot started his descent. Stegall recalled that the glide to the surface was the longest 25 minutes of his life. He came out of the clouds at 400 feet, or about 120 meters, when he saw a dike in front of him. Right, I'm at the dike between Volendam and Edam. And let me tell you what happened here 77 years and 1 day ago. Stegall was in a really precarious situation. He wanted to ditch his plane in the water, but he had no water left. So he opted to fly over this dike and land in the field somewhere. The P-47 was a rugged airplane and he knew it could take a beating. The fields were very boggy, so he thought his best bet would be to make a wheels-up landing. Stegall crashed his plane right here in this swampy field, and as soon as he got out he saw that people were coming from over that way behind these houses from the town of Edam. The houses you see behind me weren't built yet, the bridge, those trees, they're all new. He managed to get out of his plane quickly and he ran that way because he saw a farm. Well, behind me is the farm where Stegall ran to. In 1944, this was also one of the fields of the farmer. Stegall ran from over there, it's about, well, I'd say 200 meters, 300 meters. He ran over here and saw two boys at the farm stacking hay. He climbed up a ladder and he jumped in, telling them in English to stack him with hay in order to hide him. Well, the boys, or the men, only knew Dutch, so the communication was a bit complicated. Right at that moment, from the path where you see people walking right now, another boy came. This was a 17-year-old called Dick Veerman, and he was riding his bike that way to the city of Purmerend to deliver some goods or something, when he noticed the crashing plane. So he raced over here. He saw a bit of commotion at the farm, so he went there and he saw the pilots in the hay. Dick didn't know any English either, but he acted quickly. He took off his clothes, some of it, and put them on the pilot. Stegall was now dressed up as an ordinary Dutch, townsperson. Dick quickly hatched a plan. He told the pilot to sit on the back of his bike, and Dick and the pilot rode over there. Dick's father had a duck farm in that direction. When Dick and the pilot reached the farm, Dick went to his father to get some help. His father knew a couple guys in the town who could speak English and were part of the Dutch resistance. The English-speaking man asked the pilot if he wanted to be turned over to the Germans or if he wanted to go back to Britain. Quite obviously, Stiegel replied that he wanted to go back to his airbase in Britain. On the morning after the crash of the P-47, some more local Dutch resistance men went to the crash site. They noticed a track of oil in the field. One of the resistance members decided to light it. The fire went down the fuel track and within a few seconds the plane was engulfed in flames. There were even accounts that some of the .50 caliber ammunition went off and went flying everywhere, but nobody got hurt. Stiegel remained in the town of Edam for 3 days until they decided it was unsafe for him. He was to be transferred to the city of Purmerend. Dick and the pilot met one last time to say goodbye. The pilot told Dick his name was Floyd Martin Stiegel and he gave him a British coin. Stiegel was then transferred city to city and he helped the resistance where he could. In the city of Purmerend he helped the underground movement to print illegal pamphlets. And on a few occasions he had to hide from the Germans in the field somewhere. He also ended up at the Prinsengracht in Amsterdam with a rich family where he met another pilot, the 30-year-old David G. Alford, who had crashed in a B-17 Flying Fortress bomber. Alford and Stiegel became good friends and they helped the Dutch underground where they could. The Dutch resistance was waiting for a green light from London to move the pilots to a more southern city. When they finally got the green light, the 2 pilots were brought to the city of Maastricht. In Maastricht they had to hide in the famous caves there for a while, until they were finally picked up by a man who could bring them to Belgium. They were helped by someone named Fernand Dumoulin, who had a truck with a fake wall inside where he could hide a few people. Mr. Dumoulin had special papers which made sure that Germans couldn't check his truck. The original plan was that Stiegel would go to Gibraltar through the famous Comet route, which goes through Belgium, France and to a little bit of Spain and then the tip of Gibraltar, which is of course an English base, and from there they could go back to Britain. Well, by the time Stiegel and Alfred arrived in Liège, the D-Day landings had already happened. So they didn't have to go all the way to Gibraltar, they could just go up to the Allied lines and they'd be safe. Around September they arrived near the front lines and it was a dangerous situation because they could see and hear the German patrols. On September 7th they marched into a town where the people told them the Allied lines were closing in fast, and indeed they were. A jeep came riding into the town that same day asking for the 2 American pilots. They had laid contact before and they knew the pilots were coming. So Stiegel and Alford and I believe some other pilots were all brought to the American base. A few days later they were in Paris and a few more days they were back in London. But the story doesn't end here. After the war, Dick Veerman got an official decoration from President Dwight D. Eisenhower for his help with the escape of an American pilot. Dick remembered the hometown of the pilot and he sent a letter there including a photograph of Dick's 2 sisters. Stiegel received the letter, but sadly it was lost when his cellar flooded. He did however still have the photograph of the 2 sisters. A few years after the war, Dick opened an electronics store in the town of Volendam. And in 1992 a man walked in the store and he went to the counter. He didn't say a thing. All he did was lay down a photograph. It was the photograph of the 2 sisters. Dick, who was sitting behind the counter, didn't say anything either. He just grabbed his purse and laid down the British coin that Stiegel had given him in the war. Floyd Stiegel and Dick Veerman, aged 71 and 66 respectively, were reunited. The story goes that the men embraced each other for an hour.